Hey, this is Eli here, and this video is all about using loops for live performance, and specifically, which tracks should you use for your live performance. Now, I use Ableton Live when I do live performance, and I trigger different loops in that. And you don't have to use Ableton Live. There are plenty of things you can use. And these particular loops that we're going to look at are from multitracks.com, but there are plenty of other places you can get your own loops, or you can make your own loops. And but that's not what this video is about. This is about selecting which tracks we should use. Okay, I'm going to put my headphones on and then let's get to it. So here we have an Ableton Live session, and we're looking at a bunch of different tracks right here. And what I want to do is I want to go through the different tracks that I have to explain those to you. All right, so the first thing you'll notice is that if you use multitracks, you'll notice that I actually have renamed some of these tracks. Typically, this would say EG1, EG2, EG3, EG4, so on and so forth. But I went through and listened to some of them and then renamed them based on what they were. That way, it's easy to figure out what I want in there and what I don't want in there. I don't have to keep previewing the files each time. Okay, so I went and did that. And then also you'll notice that I have these two extra tracks, Click and Click SD, which is Click Subdivision. And the reason that I have that is that I like to make my own click and subdivision and send those separately to all of my headphone mixes so that people can decide how much subdivision they want in there. And that's just how I do it. And I can explain that later. But right now we're going to talk about some of these different tracks. So let me just expand these a bit. All right. And then we're going to walk through and look at what we've got. Okay, so starting on the top. Click track, talked about that. Guide, I always use the guide, of course. It just helps people stay on track. Now the drum track, here's the deal. You'll notice that I have my drum track off. And the reason that I do that is when I'm going through these, I'm deciding what I want to use. And anything I don't want to use, I'll turn it off. And this rectangle, the orange rectangle or yellow rectangle, will turn it on and off. And anyway, so I never use the live drums at all. And there's a reason for that. I think that if you don't have a live drummer, or if your live drummer is not that great, you don't want to have this in there. So if you don't have a live drummer and you got this going, people are going to go, oh, they're playing to a track. It's like karaoke, and that's not my style. I don't want to do karaoke. So rather than put that track in there, I would find some other alternative. Maybe just rearrange your track or rearrange your song in some way to feature what you do have. But anyway, even if you did have a live drummer, you wouldn't use that track either because your live drummer should be playing those parts. So that's how that goes. The next couple tracks here, we have a tambourine and we have a loop. I almost always use percussion elements like tambourine and shakers and percussion, stuff like that. And then the loop, let's go ahead and listen to this loop and see what it sounds like. So I'm going to solo it and play the chorus right here. Okay, a nice little groove. And now let's compare that to what the drums are playing. All right, let's go back and play the drums. Yeah, so you notice that the drum track and the loops are similar. And if you hold down Control, it'll play them both at the same time. All right, so yeah, you notice that they're similar, but the loop actually is the more electronic sounding. It's a little bit brighter and adds some energy there. And so in this case, I might add that loop in. Now, if your drummer isn't that tight, I probably wouldn't add the loop in because it's just going to cause some issues and it'll sound muddy because everything's not synchronized. But if your drummer's pretty good, can play to the click pretty well, I would put that loop in there. All right, let's continue on down. Now the next track here we have is a bass track. If I have a bass player, I'm not going to use this bass track. If I don't have a bass player, probably wouldn't use it either. Again, I would rearrange what I have based on my players. Now I could see in some instances where your bass player just calls in sick or something like that, and you're in a pinch, maybe you want to grab that bass track. Who knows? But for the most part, I'm not going to use the bass track. The next one is the synth bass. Now, I always use the synth bass. And the reason I do is that oftentimes the synth bass part kind of does two different things. It adds a nice, beefy subsonics that no one's really doing. I mean, your keyboard player might be doing that, but he or she might be busy doing other things. And then also a lot of times there's some kind of pulse in there, and so that's always really cool. If you have a PA that has subwoofers, this is going to help. It's going to light it up, give you like a deeper, fuller range. Now, if you don't have subwoofers, it may not do anything. Like if you're listening on a laptop right now, you might go to this synth bass part and not even hear it. But anyway, let me play what's going on here in the synth bass so you can hear what I'm talking about. So here's the verse part, and you'll hear the subsonics going on here. This is like a little bit of a pulse, very deep, very low. Okay, now let's jump to the chorus here. So it's still got that low end, but it also had became a little bit brighter, kind of a little more synthy sounding, like a buzzy, like a square wave or maybe a triangle wave, and has that pulse sound, but it also has that sub that really kind of adds to the depth of what's going on. So I always use a synth bass. Now the next collection here you notice we have 7 electric guitar parts. So that's a lot of electric guitars. And I never use all 7. Never, ever. Even if I didn't have an electric guitar player, I wouldn't use all 7. But electric guitar parts kind of cover a few things. So they'll cover rhythm. Oftentimes there are multiple rhythm tracks, like with different tones and textures, maybe like a really thick sounding electric guitar, like a Les Paul rhythm, and then maybe like a thin, like a Telecaster or a Stratocaster kind of sound. It's a little bit brighter in there. You'll get that. You'll also get some ambient sound, and anytime there's ambient type of stuff and it's not the main part, I will include that. If it is the main part and your electric guitar player is fine at doing that type of ambient sound, then I would go ahead and let them take care of it. But when there are other things going on that your player is most likely going to cover, grab that ambient stuff. It's really cool. It's usually really high. A lot of people aren't really playing high. The keyboard player typically isn't playing super high stuff, and your guitar players aren't either. So it adds that nice kind of highness. So you got your sub bass in the super lows, and you got kind of your ambient stuff up on top, and it makes even more full range. It's really nice. But let's go ahead and listen to some of these. So let's listen to electric guitar 1 here. Let me play that on the chorus. Yeah, nice solid rhythm part. Yeah, that's a solid electric rhythm part, and you're probably going to let your guitar player cover that, and so I wouldn't use that. And anyway, so that's off, as you can see here. And then the next one I have is electric guitar thin rhythm. So let's listen to that one. Very similar, a little more driving, but it's thin. And because it's more boring than that other one, your electric guitar player probably won't play that. And so you could add that. It might help. It may not help. But I decided to use that one. And so let's listen to this next one. This is kind of a counter melody. And let's play that back. Just like a little added extra rhythm. Here we've got it on verse 4. It's kind of a neat part. Your player may play that. So this is one of the interesting things about these loops, is that you'll have kind of different parts. So there's kind of a nice rhythmic part, but your player might cover that because there's not a ton going on. You can look at kind of the other things that are happening here. And then it's got over here that kind of counter melody thing, right? So the way that you deal with that is if you want to keep part of it, you can actually just edit right here if you're using Ableton Live. If you're using some other DAW, of course you can edit it. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit on this. And let's say I wanted to keep this part and then not use that other part. So I'll just dial it in right here. And then if you right click, you get to your context menu. I'm going to split that. And then basically I'm just like cutting that off, right? And that way that won't play. So you could do that. So I do this often. I'll listen to especially parts that have different ideas happening on them. I'll use the parts that I want to use, and then parts that are being covered by my players, I'll just take them out. So don't feel like locked into that particular arrangement that they have. You can change it up. And also that makes me think about, like, overall, I know the temptation is to just use all the tracks, to use everything, but really that's going to create a lot of muddiness, okay? And then also you're not going to be able to feature your own players. And that's what you want to do. You want to feature your own players, let them be the driving force behind the music for sure. All of this stuff is just supposed to be ear candy or extending the range or adding a little bit of extra energy and that type of thing. So that's how we'll approach this. Okay, now let's go ahead and go down to the next guitar part. We have electric guitar 4, and let me just zoom out a little bit. Right here, electric guitar 4. Let me solo this and listen to what it is. It's like kind of like a splash or a diamond. Some people call it diamonds. All right, let me just relabel that. So EG, and then I'm going to put splashes. That's something I might use, maybe, maybe not. The next thing is the ambience. So you can see right here in verse 3, this ambience starts. Let me solo this and then play that back. Yeah, really nice high, atmospheric, ethereal kind of thing going on. Yeah, I almost always put this kind of thing in there unless my player is playing that. And in this case, they're probably not, because they're getting ready to do this part here. Yeah. That's like a slide part, right? And so if your player likes doing slide, they're probably going to select to do that. And so I would leave that other ambient thing kind of in there. Just a cool little texture. All right, let's go on down. And since I did listen to that, I'm going to rename that. Electric guitar 6 was a slide guitar. And then you'll notice something else happens over here. So let's just listen to see if that's similar or what it is. All right, interesting thing. That's like the solo, right? The guitar solo. Your player, if they're able to, they'll want to do that. So I'll just take that out. And again, you notice that we have the slide over here, and over on this side we have the solo. We don't want both of those because your player is going to play the solo there. If they play the slide, fine, then we're not going to use that track at all. But if we want to keep the slide, then we just edit this track so it doesn't include the solo. All right, fairly simple. That's the one tricky part about this, is oftentimes the same track, the same loop will have a couple different things on it, so it pays to go through and listen to it. Okay, the next one, electric guitar 7. Solo that up and listen to what's going on. Yeah, just kind of like the main hook, and so your player might play that depending, or if you have two players, one of them might play that. Okay, and obviously if you have two electric guitar players, then you're going to use less and less of this. Okay, and all right, let's jump on down to our keyboards. Now I've got to hear piano, a couple different keys doing some pulsy and rhythmic stuff, and then keys 4. Let's listen to what keys 4 is so I could label that. Solo that. Oh, a nice fat warm pad. Let me just rename that. Warm pad. What I found is that keyboard players love to play those warm pads, so I would probably take that out. Okay, and because of how big and warm that is, it's going to take up a lot of space sonically, and you don't want to kind of double that by any means. Let your keyboard player play it. Now, if you just have a piano player and they don't have any kind of pad in there, yeah, go ahead and use that. But in this case, I'm going to take it out because I know my keyboard player likes playing that kind of thing. Let's listen to the piano part. Just kind of block chords going on. Yeah, oftentimes your piano players will play that. If there's some kind of like hook, oftentimes it is in the piano. If there's a keyboard hook, it'll be in the piano in some sort. And so I always leave that out because I want my piano players to have that part, right? That keyboard players love playing little melodies and things like that. And in this case, I chose to take it out because I knew that my player would play some of that stuff. Now, these next 3 tracks here are really cool, and these are the types of tracks I always leave in. And I'll tell you why. Let's listen to them first, and then I'll tell you why I leave these in. little rhythmic, little rhythmic. Let me put the loop in, and at the same time, so you can hear like a little offbeat. Yeah. All right, so what's going on there is that's just a really tight rhythmic thing that helps kind of move the rhythm forward, move the band forward. Okay, so now the thing about that is that those types of things for a live keyboard player are really hard to play in sync. Okay, they have to be right on the money. Their keyboard has to be in perfect time, like so they have to set the beats per minute exactly the same. And also there's an issue with clocking sometimes where that pulse won't come in until the clock's ready, like until the downbeat's ready. And if they're not set up on Ableton, the same Ableton you're triggering loops with, it's oftentimes it's hard to kind of like lock up. So, and plus it's just boring. I'm just holding down a note and letting the keyboard kind of do the work. So they don't often want to play these kind of things. So I'll put that kind of loop in every time. And this one is similar to this pulse one. Let's listen to this. Yeah, let me solo the drums in there too. Kind of offbeat there. Yeah, and especially those offbeat ones, if it's just a little bit off, it just creates mud. And so I'll just use the loops rather than have the keyboard players play this kind of things. Now, the one caveat, yeah, if you have a keyboard player who loves doing that and is synced up with Ableton, whether they're triggering the loops and it's like somehow connected to their rig, or connected to Ableton, like, you know, remotely, which you could do. If they love doing it, let them do it. I mean, you know, that's fun. But truthfully, like as a keyboard player, that's boring. It's just kind of holding down a note. And anyway, let's listen to this next thing. It's similar. Now that part's like kind of a melodic ostinato or a repeated pattern just over and over and over again. Your player may want to play that. So if that's the case, you just don't use that track. Let's listen right before that to what's going on. Pulse. Just a pulse. And here's with the loop in there. And those kind of things are meant to be like machines. And anyway, so in that particular case, I would just put that in. Now, the one thing is that this track here, let's pull this open, goes from that really mechanical pulse thing to the ostinato melodic thing. So let me just play that back, and you can hear it. Oh, let me solo that. There we go. Ostinato part. All right, so let's say that your keyboard player wanted to play this part, that kind of cool little melodic thing, but you was playing something else like before that, or you just wanted to use that tight pulse right before it. Well, it's on the same track again, like the electric guitar part. So what we're going to do the same exact thing, just zoom in on that and then edit it. So if you're familiar with digital audio workstations, this should be something that you know how to do already. And then I'm going to cut that and then take that out, let my player play that, and then I'm going to just fade the edge of that so it sounds like this. Fades out and it's done. And then yep, then you would go through and get rid of all these other ones, these melodic ones. So that's up to you to decide, but I oftentimes, again, I edit my parts like that, depending on what I've got going. And then, so there are a couple ways to approach this. You can know your players well enough to kind of like figure out what they're going to do, like what they're used to, what they like to do, and then select tracks that way. Or you could sit with them and go through this. Now that obviously takes a long time, and they may or may not know exactly what they're going to do, but you can do that too. You know, when I first started using the loops, I would talk to my players quite a bit, and then at some point I kind of figured out what they were going to do and how to anticipate it, and I just narrowed it down so I didn't have to spend that time. Okay, and then the last bit here is our voices. Now vocals are a very touchy situation because your vocalist, if you have other vocal tracks in there, they might feel offended, or they might feel like, oh, why do I even need to be up here? But truthfully, used well, like background vocals put in there, add to a nice thickness to things, and you're not putting them up at the same level as your singers, but you're putting them in. It sounds like the audience is kind of singing with, which is a cool thing, and it could kind of just give it that kind of like glue and fullness. Now the thing is, if you have singers who are not that great, spend your time helping them improve, helping them with their intonation, helping them with harmonies. There are plenty of resources out there that you can go and help them with, okay? So spend your time there. I mean, you got them up with you, work on it, okay? Now, if it's just one of those situations where it's just not going to happen, then you have to have some conversations with them. Maybe they just sing melody. That's okay too sometimes. But anyway, work with your singers, and don't kind of like go behind their back and let them, pretend like they're singing on stage when you really have the tracks in there. That's not really helping anybody. But anyway, so let's go through this. I have we have 3 tracks here. I actually only ended up using one of them. Let's listen to what these are. So here's an alto track. Now you'll notice this is going to sound like a guy because this particular track is actually pitched lower. Okay. Because I did it in a lower key, so it kind of did that effect where when you slow something down or when you lower the pitch, it sounds like a guy. So let's just play this back.
I will call upon the Lord, for he alone is strong enough to save.
All right, so that's kind of like a doubled background vocal alto part. I have an alto singer who can cover that part. You could put that in a little bit lower, but I decided not to in this case. And the same with this tenor part.
I will call upon the Lord, for he alone.
A lot of effects on there. And also because it is like a lower key, it sounds a little weird, so I decided not to use that at all. Now, this tenor 2 part, let me play this back.
I will call upon the Lord, for he alone.
So that's really the same kind of thing, except that that's a melody. And so I decided to keep that because like giving a little bit of extra support to the melody to make it thicker, I thought that was useful in this case. And again, it would be kind of lower. Now, sometimes you'll have like choirs, and sometimes you'll have like gang vocals, and those are oftentimes useful to put in underneath, because then it does sound like your audience is singing with you, kind of adds some thickness to it in that way. But again, this is not meant ever to replace any of your vocalists or replace their skill level. Just spend the time to help them work on their skill. That's the way you do it, okay? So let me just kind of review my method when I approach this. What I do is I want the players that I have to be playing all of the main parts, okay? I want them to be featured, and especially if you have a really good player, maybe a keyboard player, guitar, drummer, I want them to be featured. I want people to hear them, okay? I don't want to do karaoke. That means that any main part, like any hooks or the drum part or anything like that, and especially vocals, I don't want that to just be, like a track playing in the background. What I do look for is things that will sweeten this, make my frequency range wider, like lower, deeper, or that high ambient stuff. I want to put that in there for sure. Also, anything that helps out rhythmically, like those pulses, those kind of synthy pulses are always helpful. Kind of tambourine, or electronic loops, things like that. Pretty cool. I always add that kind of stuff for sure. And it takes what you already have that's really good and just sweetens it in some way, adds some ear candy, adds some energy and that type of thing. So that's my approach when I do this, and I hope this is helpful. Have fun doing this, and we'll see you in the next video.